On the corner of Cedar and Polk Street in San Francisco is a building that houses a halal market, a sushi restaurant, and an overpriced French bakery. The wall between the French bakery and Cedar Street divides those who can afford the pastry and the ability to sit in a restaurant from a neighborhood of struggling people. They love to paint on this wall. Messages range from condolences to friends who have passed away on the street to graffiti insignias. The most recent graffiti is a splotchy spray-painted communique that reads, "Never unsee anything." This is a message to the rest of the neighborhood, demanding to not forget those that have died in the street in the Tenderloin. We use a similar framework to look at public schools in Frisco and their relationship to the Tenderloin. Offered to us by Dr. Savannah Shangay in her book, Progressive Dystopia, a long history of seeing is an anthropological tool and framework that we will be using when we examine our schools. To practice a long history of seeing is to never unsee anything. Though the TL is vilified as an open-air drug market, one of my homies recharacterized this open-airness as an open-air prison. With police on almost every corner, it's hard to believe that almost 3,000 young people live in the TL. However, there are no public schools to serve these students. So where do they go? My name is Elias, a first-year student at the University of San Francisco in the Urban Education and Social Justice program. Over the course of this podcast, we'll be thinking about our schools and students' relationships to the TL and what that means for their learning environments and our work environments. We'll be hearing from Maria in the Mission, Thomas at Washington High School, and Evelyn at Balboa High School.
At first glance, Buena Vista Horace Mann, K through 8th, or VVHM for short, looks like any ordinary school. The sounds of children gleefully laughing and screaming, their shoes hitting the pavement as they chase after the ball, parents conversing with each other about their children, teachers saying good mornings as they're rushing to prep their classrooms, and finally, the morning bell going off, leaving behind a deafening silence. If you take a closer look, you will notice how a child says, "Alcanza la pelota," and his friend will respond, "I got it," as he chases after the ball. The parents would speak and say, "Este es el último año de la mayor y la más pequeña empieza el año que viene." The teachers say, "Buenos días, ¿cómo estás? I'll see you in class." There's a linguistic intersection of English, Spanish, Spanglish, and other tongues, and it would seem that all is working in linguistic and cultural harmony. However, one would need to take a step back to understand what is seen and unseen of VVHM. My name is Maria Guerrero, and I am a para-educator and a 6th grade English student teacher at Buena Vista Horace Mann. VVHM used to be 2 separate schools, one being Buena Vista Elementary School, and the second one being Horace Mann Middle School. They were merged in 2011 through mutual agreement. Currently, the community school has a K-8 dual language immersion program where students equally engage in both Spanish and English languages throughout the school week. VVHM is also the destination for many newcomers, children who recently migrated into the U.S. from their home countries. The staff is made up of mostly Latina educators from the Bay Area. The student body is made up of roughly 84% Latinx, 8% 2 or more races, 6% white, 1% AAPI, and 1% Black. In its mission statement, VVHM aims to build a bilingual, bicultural space for all students. Recently, they have adopted the term multicultural in its statement. And while the effort is well-intentioned, the school ends up replicating injustices that continue to impact the Latina community. On an institutional level, access to dual immersion programs have historically and statistically proven to be unequal. Valdez, Freire, and Dalavan 2016 referred to this phenomenon as the gentrification of dual language. Simultaneously, VVHM finds itself at the border of a physical gentrification. On the left side looms Valencia Street. On the right side stands Mission Street, two distinct worlds separated by Bartlett Street, where VVHM is located. The dot-com era and recent tech boom dispossessed many Latinx families from the Mission District to other parts of the city or around the Bay Area. And I often hear Latina students say, "Yeah, I used to live in the Mission, but we had to move. Now I have to wake up extra early to get to school on time." And even though they no longer live in the Mission, many of these students continue to bear witness to the dispossession and the erasure of the community behind the school's windows, while the same school's program dispossesses their mother tongue. As I mentioned earlier, VVHM unintentionally perpetuates a phenomenon of gentrification of dual language. This is because even though most of the student body is made up of Latina children and of immigrant parents, it is the white students who have benefited from the program because they demonstrate more standardized testing success, and the school continues to frame English as the dominant language that students must quote unquote master. The school conceptualizes bilingualism much like SFUSD does, which is as two separate monolinguisms, Martinez 2017. There is only quote unquote native English or quote unquote native Spanish speakers, and this separation of tongues echoes the border in which VVHM stands. Spanglish is acceptable in the yard for play, but not exactly for classroom work. VVHM also adheres to standardized testing, such as the LPAC for English language learners, STAR English test, STAR Spanish test, among other tests that students are subjected to. I witnessed how the physical gentrification, the gentrification of dual languages, and the standardized testing of the tongue has provoked students to push back in ways that make sense to them. Recently, one of my 7th graders said, "Ugh, I hate the school, Miss Guerrero. Why do I gotta take so many tests? I already know English. It's hella whack." This is a statement I hear my students express time and time again. And unfortunately, I know it is a question that they will continue to ask until English ceases to be framed as a dominant language that one must indoctrinate our children into, and their community ceases from being dispossessed. With the looming budget cuts that VVHM is currently facing, the dual immersion program is at risk of being forcibly removed by the district, which will negatively impact our newcomers and push them out of the school community, once again echoing the physical gentrification of the Mission and placing the school site in a vulnerable position where they are inevitably forced to shut down.
Perched atop a hill in the Richmond district of San Francisco, with stunning views of the Golden Gate Bridge, the Pacific Ocean, and the Bay, sits George Washington High School. George Washington High School, also known as WASH by its students and faculty, has been the epicenter of many San Francisco news stories over the past few years. Stories including the debate on whether or not the school should remove racist depictions and murals of the colonization of America at the hands of the school's namesake, George Washington. WASH was also part of the San Francisco School Board's shaky attempt to rename George Washington High School, along with dozens of other San Francisco public schools it deemed as honoring racist or sexist historical figures. Yet, the ultimate decision was to keep it as is. But this isn't a story about the many conflicts this school has and its image or perception. This is a story about belonging, about being seen, about being valid in a space. And within these stories mentioned, there's a cry from people, from students, families, and staff to be seen and taken seriously. What must it feel like to be a child of color as you are expected to learn in buildings that see you as less than? How does one find belonging when harmful narratives are not critically dismantled? So who am I? My name is Thomas. I'm currently pursuing a master's in teaching credential with an emphasis on biology and life sciences. As a Black student and educator, I feel that I still face some of the same conflicts and issues that many of the students I see and interact with are facing. I too am trying to make sense and meaning in this space, And hopefully within the next few minutes, I'll be able to describe how WASH may be going through its own sort of self-discovery and how the students may be an indicator of that change. WASH is a minority enrollment school, meaning that a single minority or a combination of minorities exceeds 50% of the total enrollment. In this case, WASH has a student population where the Asian population is nearly 60%, followed by 16% Latinx, 11% white, and just 4% black. Students arrive from all over and from all areas with varying degrees of economic prosperities, which creates various class and identities that come into contact with each other. A school-based survey reporting a sense of belonging among students showed that 53% had favorable experiences, meaning that 40% of children felt that they did not belong. In another survey focusing on social-emotional learning, the survey asked about self-efficacy, which, in this case, is the confidence a student has in their ability to succeed and to exert control over their own motivation, behavior, and environment. When surveyed, 45% of students agreed, meaning 55% of students felt that they had little to no control. With these numbers, there are clear signs of misunderstandings among many of the student population. This data suggests that two things are possibly happening. One, that students feel as if they don't belong, and two, that students don't have control or motivation. Within my short time here, I've witnessed firsthand these two things. I've had conversations with students about their own racial identity and whether they are black or not due to their family background. I've seen white children speaking harshly of their Asian peers, and I have seen children simply not trying or caring because they don't have to. These instances are not uncommon and not unheard of, but when I reflect on the conversation I had with the previously mentioned black child, I recall in my own memory times of my own not belonging, times of questioning my racial identity within a school of people who weren't my peers. Race-based violence is an interpersonal and communal occurrence that may not be as physical as fists or bodily contact, but can be just as damaging. Stereotypes perpetuated by white students are harmful and often question the identities of black students, such as bringing into question black students' place of origin or cultural identity. The teacher, in this case, hardly stopped what they were doing to interject or to educate or to challenge the white students' thoughts or assumptions. Yet the teacher who self-identifies as gay is very willing to have a somewhat critical conversation with the same group of white students about the gay identity. This particular black child is also the only black child in this class, and thus must feel moments of isolation, moments of frustration, and moments of dissociation. Although the white students were making negative comments, the black child is the only one to be, in various ways, reprimanded for their place in this reality, but will often be met with a lack of empathy as he faces the difficulties that lay ahead of him. Yet, when we marry the ideas of minority enrollment, a lack of belonging that spans all races and ethnicities, and a lack of motivation, what are we really saying about what is going on at WASH? Who, if any, are really benefiting from a system that doesn't represent its population? As WASH stumbles to find its own meaning, the children taught within its walls are also in search of theirs. I hope that within my short time here, I will be able to answer some of these questions and to lend an ear and to create space for those searching for their place in this world.
Hi, this is take 15. My name is Evelyn Wong. I am an art teacher at Balboa High School. So, reflecting back on my first impressions of Balboa High School, I'm currently a second year teacher, still in an emergency credential. But my first impression, I think, has to do with the very first staff meetings at the beginning of school on my first year as a first time ever high school teacher. I just remember, the impression of a liberal and progressive school, a school that did land acknowledgements, a school with staff that reflected a lot of diversity. I personally had come from, or my own high school education was in San Mateo County, although I did grow up with a K to 5 education in SFUSD, but I had started to my family had moved away to San Bruno, which is like the suburb outside of San Francisco. So yeah, I just remember the types of people that were in that meeting everyone for the first time. I kind of experienced, what is called a culture shock. So my teachers in high school had mostly been white. The occasional POC teacher, but most of them were white. Everyone also, dressed business casual. And thinking about humanizing education, this was definitely not an emphasis in our school. The occasional relationships that were formed, it was not, a value that was emphasized. I personally just remembered I had a few cool teachers, but again, they worked, like Stovall said, in spite of, the school policy, the institution of school itself. So yes, there were, I just remembered thinking, wow, like the amount of teachers here with tattoos, the amount of teachers here with colored hair, a lot of them were dressed casually. The other thing to note when seeing Balboa as a school is the demographic of the student population. So it is considered a minority-majority school with 95.8% minority enrollment. 53% is Asian, 30% is Hispanic, 5% is Black, and like 5% is mixed, and we have a 4% white population and 1.5% Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. So that is a very diverse population. This also was a shock to me, although I experienced this diversity in elementary school, but as soon as I moved away from San Francisco, I experienced classrooms that were mostly filled with white kids, essentially, especially in AP classes. It is in these staff meetings that I think you can really see Balboa as the community that it is. So one of the first things we talked about were issues with creating a sense of community and a sense of belonging. As a new teacher being introduced to this community, I think they were discussing this because they were coming after the pandemic and what that had done to Balboa during that time, during school through Zoom. Students had just returned for a year, and what problems that created, how that created morale problems among the teachers, and also how students didn't know how to act as a community in a physical space together. I remember also just starting teaching in this place at a time where there were a lot of issues in general, just with the district and our school. And a lot of these problems, I think, reflecting back on it, were issues of how to get students to behave accordingly. So we had a different dean at the time, and I think she was really struggling with all the issues that had come up. But I think since then we have a new dean, and I think one of the strategies that admin is employing is by just hiring more staff to sort of support the disciplinary backbone of Balboa. So there's a fresh specialist now. This person coordinates with youth and I think the after school program, and is a very strong presence. And this person has been able to help the students who are, the ones that fall through the cracks, the one that hang in the hallways, in those fugitive spaces that Savannah Shangay talks about. I also feel like I see a lot of success with the school coordinating with CBOs. This presence that is standing outside the gates after school, after the bell rings, making sure students go home, making sure they don't loiter in the space in front of the school, which is sort of like a large area for fights to break out. And also there is another policy inside the school that admin is also enacting, which is new from last year, which is called the hallway sweeps. Sort of almost in a dystopian manner. After the bell rings, occasionally on the PSA announcements, they'll announce hallway sweeps are being conducted. If you are caught in the hallways, you will be sent to a counselor or the dean's office, sort of in this threatening, I don't know, 1984-esque style. The purpose of these hallway sweeps seem to be, for student safety. There was a lockdown last year, and that event where a gun was found on the student, I think, had to do with an altercation that happened in the hallway. So it is with that in mind that they really pushed this hallway sweep measure. There's also the fact that there were like record high fire alarms being set by the vaping happening in the bathroom. So as part of a deterrent to this, this is what the hallway sweeps are, hoping to correct. And also there was it culminated in an instance where the girls' bathroom was literally caught in fire for some reason. So there is just a sense that the hallways are very monitored now, very actively monitored. Last year, a lot of the teachers complained that there's no security guards around while a lot of these events were taking place, fights in the halls, smoking, and just general disturbance in the hallways. And last year I think about that as well. I think about maybe there was a sense that there was not that much control in the hallways, and I honestly kept my door closed because of that, just so the disturbance from the hallways wouldn't leak into the classroom. But this year, there are a lot of measures that seem to be centered around safety. A lot of us on the third floor insist on keeping our doors open, just so we're able to see students passing by. The cohesiveness of the bathroom passes. We all have a very unified system. When a student leaves, we keep their phone, although this is also sort of a safety concern. But when they go to the bathroom, they put their phone in a basket that every classroom should have. There is a system of bathroom passes, because they usually kind of get lost or replaced, that has been generated by the ILT, which is the something leadership of teachers. I feel like I should know that acronym. But yes, this group of teachers are the teachers that work collectively and with admin to create these sort of policies with community, with belonging, with safety in mind, with varying degrees of success. I don't know, I think for students who I've encountered, they're not a huge fan of the hallway sweeps. It does kind of give a sense of policing, but I think as teachers, as admin, there's a sense that we are constantly building relationships with students. We explain to them the need for these measures. And nowadays, when I talk to students, they sort of understand that, certain behaviors, the next steps, referral, I don't even have to sort of say things. They sometimes just kind of complete the sentence, even though I'm not directly saying I am about to enact a punishment, but they sort of know that there is a punishment, and I think that that has been cohesively communicated so far. I also don't want to give all the credit of this emerging sense of community and safety to admin, just strict admin policy. I think teachers are working in the background to create a sense of community. I think in the background there is a peer mediating presence created by one of the teachers, Amelia Bjorklund. I think there are teachers like Krisha, who also, is one of these abolitionist teachers. There is a sense of unification, I think, even knowing that there is a pro-Palestine collective of teachers who meet every Tuesdays. And I think that these teachers also work on the back end to create this sense of community and to, grow the seeds of resistance in students against dehumanizing policies, which, some of these admin policies could be doing. My final note on that is that I think, personally, I feel kind of disconnected from discussions of discipline or students who get suspended and what is being done, or re-entry practices. I don't know if the ILT participates in this, but I think maybe there could be more discussions, maybe more involvement around certain students. I understand that some of these suspensions aren't even, mostly I think they're for things that happen outside of school as well, so not in the classroom, and that kind of leaves teachers out of the discussion. It doesn't allow us a chance to be part of the solution, or help us understand that student, and how we can give them an education, versus just being a school, as Stovall says.